Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adobe's Chief Brand Officer, Heather Freeland.
Hello and welcome. It is amazing to see so many incredible people here, and I love that we have a packed house for this because this is going to be good. So I am thrilled to be here, and I've been a lifelong marketer and a lifelong film buff, but one of the things I don't know is about how to market a film. And so we are going to learn from two of the best in the industry on exactly that topic. And even in just prepping for this session, one of the things that struck me is how much the dynamics have changed with how movie going has changed, how distribution has changed. And I think we're going to hear a lot of amazing things from my two panelists in crime. So I am excited to welcome on stage with me first Matt Landers, who is the SVP of Marketing at IFC, and Mark Gilbar, who's the president of Imagine Entertainment, Brands, IP, and Partnership. So welcome, guys. Okay, and I'm sitting on a water here. There we go. Well, first, why don't we start by hearing a little bit more about you guys and kind of the journeys you've been on through your career.
Sure. Hi, I'm Matt Landers. I'm the head of marketing for the feature film group at AMC Networks. So that's the IFC Films label that's been around for about 20 years as an art house, kind of, one of the original independent film labels in the US, but also the streaming services in AMC Networks portfolio like Shudder, AMC Plus, Sundance Now, the feature films that are going to end up on those services. I went to school not knowing anything about a job like this existing. It was more to write scripts, and I went to NYU for dramatic writing and didn't know how to get people to read my scripts. So I started taking internships and found a way to make money working with filmmakers and telling stories the ways I love. I've honestly always loved trailers, even a little more than movies sometimes. So yeah, and I, have been doing that I've been with IFC for 10 years and doing this for about 20 years.
Amazing. Great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, and Mark?
Louder? Does that sound good? My name is Mark. That is louder. My name is Mark Gilbar. I'm the president of Brands, IP, and Partnerships at Imagine Entertainment, which is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's studio production company. It goes back a long way. I started in advertising about 25 years ago, just doing 30-second TV commercials for toe fungus medication, and that is true.
You are a really good marketer.
It was a memorable spot. I don't want to go on that side quest here. But at the same time, I was starting anonymous content, and I forget the agency did BMW Films. I don't know if you remember that, with Clive Owen and John Woo and Guy Ritchie and all the like. And that, to me, changed my perception of what brands could do in terms of storytelling, what marketing could do. But at that time, I believe it's like 1999, it was distributed on DVD inside of Vanity Fair. That's where the internet was at that time. And so I loved it and thought, man, I want to do more of this, but it just wasn't happening in that way. So I sort of stuck the course in advertising, but over time, the technological innovations and the platforms expanded such that brands could do longer form storytelling, and eventually sort of blended into entertainment. So about 7 years ago, Imagine started a division to work with brands, develop IP, not in a product placement integration sort of way or co-marketing way, but from the ground up to build longer form stories in partnership with brands.
Amazing. Well, one of the things that is incredible about the time that we're all living in is that everyone can be a creator. And that means that there is more content, more films, short, long form, you name it, out there than ever before, and more content to consume. So I'd love to hear from you guys how you think about cutting through the clutter, and how do you think about breaking through, whether that's more broadly or even here at Sundance.
Sure. So when we're evaluating movies now, we're thinking more than ever about how clearly and concisely the pitch can be represented to people. There's not as much time that you have to tell the story of what your movie's about, to get the foot in the door. So how clearly, even in the title, and how directly you can communicate, what movies this should remind people of, but also how specifically it's different, how this is something you haven't heard before. If you're just reminding people of your influences, then you haven't really started your campaign yet even. So we think a lot about that, and we're thinking more specifically about, subgroups of audiences than we used to before. It's less about trying to be, something to everyone. It's more thinking, for whom can this be the most important movie at a given time? And how can you start with those people and make them take ownership of the movie and see its success as their success, and make them help do the work for you and champion it. So yeah, I think how succinctly you can communicate it and who really specifically you can be for. The specific can be the foundation for the universal.
Yeah, I think it's obvious when you think about it, but the clutter is really sameness. So breaking through the clutter is really just how you can be unique. It's true in advertising. I think there's a lot of ubiquity in, like, you see insurance commercials. If you watch live sports, they're all the same, but the ones that break out just find a way to be a little bit different from the rest. So it's funnier, it's more serious, or whatever that may be. I think the same is true with movies and movie trailers. All movies are sort of facsimiles of some other type of film, a genre or trope, and you're just finding a new spin on it that feels fresh. But I can tell you, as far as movie trailers go, the one that was talked about the most amongst my friends most recently was Danny Boyle's newest 28 Years Later. And the reason why it's different, it just felt like no one, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It uses this old recording of a Rudyard Kipling poem. It's super creepy that he found. But like, it just, all people love that movie anyway. They're ready for it. But like, it just felt different, and that gets you excited, and that breaks through. So, I mean, it's not easy to do, but it's really about figuring out where everyone else is and just trying to differentiate, even if it's a couple degrees.
Amazing. Well, and Matt, you hit on this a little bit, but one of the key things when you're a marketer is really zoning in and understanding your target audience and finding those insights that's going to really connect with them and help them choose you. How do you do that with a film? Like, do you kind of reverse engineer and kind of say, who do we think this is going to appeal to? Do you work with the director? How do you think about that?
I mean, you're always working with the director, but more with the how you're going to target people, because everything you're doing shouldn't be fighting the material. You want to be doing what you can be to work with the most marketable elements or the most compelling narrative elements of the film, rather than trying to retrofit the film into what you would prefer to be marketing. But in terms of how you find the audience is going to work with, that's you have more opportunity to listen to your audience than you did before. When you used to release a trailer in theaters, you couldn't do as much beyond focus grouping in advance to see how is this trailer performing. We know almost immediately from the digital ads we'll run around the trailer. That's a lot of times when our campaign tends to take shape for us. We're not only beginning kind of the top of funnel retargeting pool for who we're going to market to, but we know what metrics now correlate with intent. At what rate is this being shared? How far are people watching into it? And we know more about who those people are than we would have before. So we can be a little more humble in what the audience tell us. So it's a balance between really confidently staking a claim of, we think this is incredibly cool, because if it's too passive and too broad, then no one's going to engage with it. But then you do have to respond to, once you've seen who's reacting to what you've put out there as confidently as you can, like how do you pivot? But it's very focused on frequent moviegoers too now. There's something like 30% or less of all moviegoers make up over 90% of the ticket sales. It's like certain people who are going very frequently. So you're either in the business of being that one or two movies that everybody's seeing, or we're more often in the position of trying to be really smart about who we're reaching and trying to get excited, because they're people who already have a habit of looking for and going to movies.
I mean, we were talking before this, and that was absolutely fascinating to me, just how, movie-going habits have changed. Post-COVID, they changed. With the advent of streaming, they changed. And how, when you talking about how you have a finite window of time to really connect with the audience and have to be out there up front. I'd love to hear you share a little bit more about that with this group as well.
Yeah, and with things that are direct on streaming, it's a little different, but we need to create word of mouth. We used to be able to open a movie in New York and LA, and there would be some hopefully organic buzz from critics and festivals, but you would use traditional press outlets and try to get a good enough opening in New York and LA that then word of mouth would filter out, and you'd have months in theaters to gain word of mouth and let that build. and you had audiences who were coming every week to the movies, and it was just about what movie they were going to see. Now people need to make an active choice for your movie, usually, to go to the movies to see your movie. And there's more of an impetus put on driving word of mouth online and starting to tell the story of what the movie is for months in advance of when it comes out. Your word of mouth has to start, even before your trailer comes out. Ideally, if you've got socially active cast, it's like when you're announcing your cast and your production, what you're capturing on set there, you're building word of mouth for the movie so that by the time it comes out, that's like almost the end of a journey or a story for people and the beginning of another. So yeah, there's a lot more work you have to do before the movie comes out, because if it doesn't work in that first opening weekend, if people aren't excited enough to pre-buy ticket sales or make plans, then you don't have much of an opportunity to stick around and have people find you.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, and you all represent two kind of ends of the spectrum in terms of filmmaking. And Mark, obviously, Imagine has produced some of the most incredible blockbusters of our time, and obviously, you're focused more on truly independent films. I'd love to hear, Mark, first from you. Like, what are some of the big lessons and ways you think about marketing a blockbuster that might apply to more the smaller independent film?
Well, today, I think in order to go to the theater, it really needs to feel like it's an event, because it's takes a lot. If you have kids, a babysitter, by the way, if it's a family movie is usually when I'm going to the theater most, because my kids, I live in LA, they're seeing all the billboards and they're seeing the Wicked, Stanley, whatever, and like they're inundated with a lot of brand partnerships, by the way. And they're like, when are we going to see it? When are we going to see it? When are we going to see it? And so you've got to go see it, and it really does feel like it's a moment.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Obviously, Barbie, which is both things. Barbie is a movie born out of a brand partnership, and it's also a movie that was co-marketed incredibly well with other brands. But it felt like if you weren't a part of it, I mean, this is true going back a ways, but now even more so. If you weren't, if you didn't see it, you weren't going to be a part of this conversation, and that's
Mhm.
just not a good feeling.
No.
But then I would say in the streaming era, it becomes less about and even in rural areas where you're maybe not seeing those billboards like we are, it's all about the key art. And this will connect to Adobe products, but you need to capture the attention of the viewer on, with just a piece of art, which is a combination of talent, usually because it's someone's face that you maybe recognize, a great title, cool design, and then you roll over it and you're going to get the trailer or scene or something, but you may never have heard of it before. There may be zero word of mouth, and you're relying upon that limited time and space to capture them. And to be honest, that's often out of our hand. I mean, we're very involved in the marketing of our films, but like it's the algorithm and the
Oh, yeah.
experts, and they're ABC testing 3 different versions of the poster and serving them. We may see different versions, so it's gotten crazy. But theatrical versus streaming changes everything.
Absolutely. And Matt, I'm curious, what do you take away from some of the big blockbuster films that you may apply down to how you think about marketing smaller films?
We're looking at the fundamental concepts that are working or connecting and how that scales to us. So when you talk about eventizing something, we're not always in the position to eventize something either in terms of mass media marketing or just positioning something as a spectacle cinematically. So it's the social elements of the event that you're talking about, where that does grant access to eventizing something for people, films of any size. If you can make your film feel like a social event that a group of one size starts taking ownership of, that starts to scale online, then people will come out to see a movie in theaters and with friends, because it feels like part of a conversation that way. So yeah, that scales to us. And then we're usually we always need to be counter programming to what studios are doing. So if our art's going to be seen in a wall of famous people's faces, then like for Late Night with the Devil, our lead actor's head was on fire, and that stands out next to the United States lead actor, because every other poster next to ours is an actor whose head isn't on fire. But yeah, and I think Longlegs did a great job of it. Like, Nicolas Cage is in the movie, but you're withholding that information and using more impressionistic artwork to stand out and create a tone. And so we know we can't compete on the stage of a Barbie. We're trying to be the alternative to a Barbie as aggressively as we can be.
Amazing. Well, and I'm, one of the amazing things about being a part of this industry, and you talked about it from your early career, is the magic of the storytelling in the films. And as a marketer, it's no different. I mean, you have a much longer form to tell a story, but how do you think about telling a story, whether it's in the trailer or the marketing, when you bring a film to market? Mark, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll start first with brands because that's what I'm always going to lean towards. But, brands have been telling stories for a century, and media has dictated the evolving media landscape has dictated how they're doing it. So initially, it was just posters out in the street, and you tell a story in a single image, maybe a headline. Print ads would have longer copy. Radio would just use sound. Television in the 1950s, all of a sudden, you can tell a story with film, and television exploded, and they just broke it up in 30 seconds. So for the next 75 years, brands were just telling stories in 30-second intervals, which is kind of insane because it's not the ideal length to tell a story. I think we're right. But they got really good at it. Agencies got really good at it. And then that changed, and brands started to realize that there was an opportunity to tell super long form. For them, initially was a few minutes, but then, hey, we can make movies if we do it thoughtfully and we're not trying to sell something. We need to be developing our audience and talking to our consumers. So let's partner with, legacy entertainment companies outside of our agencies and think about the types of movies that we can create, And so that's sort of the partnership that we offer brands.
Amazing. What about you? How have you brought your early days of screenwriting to bear now?
Some of it comes into play when you're laying out the narrative of a campaign or of a trailer. You're thinking of character and act structure and everything, but all media is almost inherently interactive now in a way it wasn't when I was first learning it. It was a one-way conversation. We were like stand-up comedians where only one person has the microphone. Now the story emerges much more organically as a conversation with your audience and you want it to emerge that way. The stuff that sticks with people are the things that they don't feel like are coming directly from a brand, that they feel like are coming more authentically from an audience. So we're trying to, when we're marketing a horror movie, for example, we're trying to find ways for our messaging to be surfaced by the horror community in a way that they feel like that message is their own and is coming from fans. Not in a creepy, inceptive way, but in a way that's really working in partnership with your audience rather than speaking kind of ex cathedra to them. So, yeah, it's a unique challenge every time because you don't want to lose control of it, but you need to leave room for your audience to play a role in it rather than just saying, this is what this movie is, accept it.
So I can imagine that, and you touched on this briefly, but that the world has changed pretty dramatically, as you mentioned, with new, far more engaging platforms where you can hear directly from viewers and fans of your genre or your talent. What new platforms and techniques are you using in the last few years as with the continued explosion of social media and community platforms and the like?
I mean,
Yeah.
TikTok and YouTube are incredibly powerful, and
Yeah.
that's been a particularly recent trend. I mean, there's still, it's so much of our audience and our work now is done through, I used to put together a media plan, and I knew, every, alt weekly newspaper in every town in the country, or every NPR station in every market in the country. Now it's much more. It's all concentrated within Meta and Google and TikTok. That's a vast majority of our media plan. And when we're doing TV, it's kind of connected TV or done programmatically with those kinds of services. So we spend a lot more time thinking about affinity targeting and hashtags and how we are going to break our audiences into pieces to learn the most from who's reacting to what. But yeah, there's a lot less power that the individual out having a feature or a review in an individual outlet has. There's much more power. There's some power in aggregators, but we work a lot with our audiences directly and creators, having the creators host screenings with us or working with them to debut something we want to do an activation around a particular clip we want them to present interactively versus just debuting it on Access Hollywood or something.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would say that years before I started at Imagine, it was mostly established screenwriters that would come in for general meetings. But even the time I've been there, it's increasingly creators and filmmakers that haven't made a movie yet, but have established their own audience and voice on these emerging platforms. And the Adobe suite of products have empowered all kinds of creators to really show their skills and level the playing field. And we Imagine and Adobe did this great partnership last year called Minutes to Movies, where it was a Instagram film festival where filmmakers could put their finished short films, and we looked through them all, and the final 3 got to come into Imagine, and we're developing some of those into some longer form projects. So yeah, the talent is everywhere, and we're just constantly on the lookout for an AI too. It's like Ron is always meeting with these emerging AI filmmakers because he's so fascinated in what
Oh,
it's going to
stop it.
do and how it's disruptive.
That's amazing. Well, I'm curious, and this partnership that we did together, I was lucky enough to get to watch the films and be a judge in it, and just like the incredible talent that's out there. And these were all short films, and any one of them could have just, been long form and magical. I mean, it was just I was so impressed. But I'm curious. Obviously, there's competitions like that, but how do you all find the next up and comer filmmaker, and how you identify talent, and how do filmmakers break through and set themselves apart?
Well, I would say, I mean, for filmmakers, it's hard. They have to have made a film of some kind,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes it's at festivals, and there's clearly a breakout filmmaker, and everyone is inundating them. But we're one of those places.
Yep.
And sometimes we've just found a film or a creator on social, and oftentimes they've already gotten representation. It's hard to get there that early, but again, we're a stop along the way of their general meetings. But I'd say more so with writers. It's like you could just sit down and write something, and it just explodes, and that's where you feel
Wow.
like you can maybe get to someone first if you're us.
Fascinating. And what about you? I know you guys are doing a lot of acquisition here this week, so curious, not to set you up to be inundated after this panel, but
Yeah, and
but would love to, yeah, hear what breaks through for you guys.
we do less development, and we're less equipped to do some of the earliest stage stuff that Imagine does. But we do so a lot of the stuff we're acquiring are filmmakers or producers we have worked with before, or festivals and agencies that kind of solicit stuff for us. But um, I'd say that the sort of pipeline for new filmmakers that we'll find is it's not as controlled by the festivals as it used to be. A short film is still a great proof of concept, but the change has been the ease with which you can create your own short film and make it a proof of concept without the support of a festival. And one of our most successful horror movies for Shudder was a film called Skinamarink that was like a very experimental movie. Honestly, it was very liminal spaces. It was this guy shot it in his childhood home in Canada for like $18,000, I think, all in. But he managed a YouTube channel where he had first started to connect with his audience and hone his craft. And that was even before the film came to a Fantasia and was acquired by us as a feature. He started to prove, learn how to reach an audience and prove that they were connecting with it online without the support of kind of the gatekeepers. And I think we look at more of that now for acquisitions than we used to, not waiting for an agency to bring something to us, but looking at who's doing anything interesting online that we think we could work with them to help take it to feature length. Because it's hard to just make a movie, yourself. Your first movie is your hardest to get going.
Absolutely. Well, so Mark, I want to go back to your comment about Barbie before. Brands are playing a bigger and bigger role, both in kind of being integrated into films, but also in the marketing of films. And Barbie's an incredible example of that. We've seen it with Wicked lately. Curious, particularly in your role, how you've seen that change over time, and how you see brands playing a role in marketing and in original content.
Yeah, so I could talk about this for a long time. So just you gotta.
We will be setting up time later.
Okay, good. Yeah, Barbie is a really interesting story. Even before Barbie, there's a lot of movies that were about brands that weren't done in partnership with those brands. Social Network, The Founder, even Tetris, BlackBerry, Flamin' Hot, Air was done without Nike.
Yeah.
They're all great films, and they Ford versus Ferrari. Sorry, it'll keep occurring to me, because the brands have great stories to tell. Barbie and Lego are a bit unique in that both those brands were in big trouble in like early 2000s and kind of dug their way out through storytelling. Lego in part through licensing and figuring out a tone that it could make animated shorts. Barbie, through female empowerment and some storytelling on social and stuff. And so by the time Lego was a little bit ahead of it, by the time they were ready to make a feature film, people were sort of had a different view of the brand and were ready for it. And the other thing is that they both found incredible talent to partner with. Lego is Lord and Miller, and Barbie wasn't originally Greta and Margot, but eventually found them and trusted them with the brand in a way that most brands would be afraid to do. So what it means for brand, and we were talking about this a long time before those movies, but those movies which we had nothing to do with were great because they're such easy ways to point to what success looks like. But in the mix of media, 30-second commercials, it doesn't look like are going away. All of the streamers have opened up ad tiers, so now it's back, even though I don't feel like it's, it just doesn't feel like it's the right way to do it. But that these brands see that they can, if they're deliberate and find the right partners, that they can find the right stories that they want to tell. And it's not always about their brand directly. We have a lot of projects where it's sort of connected in a way that would surprise you, and they just want to be a part of it because they can be here at Sundance. They can do all sorts of things downstream that are going to reach consumers in a way that they'll be grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you seen brands start to play a role in more independent films,
Yeah, I think
or is it more organic?
I think the ways that the ad market has changed has made it imperative for brands of different sizes to get involved in different sizes of projects. So, brands who used to only want to be in a 4-quadrant, 4,000 screen release movie know who their audience is more specifically now and are trying to work with, brands that reach that audience. So if an audience who loves horror movies is, the brand you want to reach, then working on a Shutter produced movie is, a really targeted and more scaled way for you to more natively reach the people you want. So we're talking to them much more often at, early production stages than ever in my career.
Amazing. Now, I'm curious, as a marketer, one of the first questions I always get asked by my boss is, what's your KPI, your key performance indicator, your goal? And as we were talking about before, it used to be kind of box office numbers, right? And that was as much a signal of what was working as it became a signal of what you should go see. You saw, you would see as a consumer what the numbers were, and you'd say, oh, maybe I should be seeing that. I don't want to be missing out. As the world and the landscape has changed and streaming has changed the dynamic, how do you think about your goals of your marketing campaigns?
I mean, box office is still tremendously important. It really is the tip of the spear, not only just as for revenue, but there's no greater kind of promotional vehicle for a movie, introducing a new movie to people. And it's, so yeah, we focus on that a great deal, and we're looking at kind of how our material is being shared in advance of that. Like how we're looking less at how many people we reached, what we paid for it, but for every 1,000 people we reached, how were they engaging socially with it? But we used to just release a movie in theaters and then hand it over to output partners. Now we are our own output partner. We have to think about the life cycle of the movie and, our brands as consumer facing brands, and just how is the movie going to transition to a home video life. And then when it does that, that's a whole different set of KPIs of not just how does it play with your existing subscribers, but how many new people did it bring in to subscribe to you. So we're thinking not just who did this play to, but yeah, kind of it could have played to a smaller amount of people, but if those were all people who wouldn't have been on your service before the campaign, that's much more valuable than something that played to a ton of the people you already had subscribed.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I would add critical reviews stuff, I guess, to some degree. But for branded stuff, they're very interested in KPIs because they come from that world. So when we release something, we're focused on measurement because it depends. Certain brands have more appetite for experimentation. We'll just do something and sort of watch and see if it has an impact. But other ones are very focused on, a paid media approach where we need to make sure that X number of people see this in order for it to be a good return on our investment.
Amazing. Well, and last question, kind of touching on something you said, Mark. You mentioned that Ron is getting more interested in new technologies and the use of AI in filmmaking. I'm curious to hear from both of you how you see that changing and evolving the industry and also the way you market films.
Well, I'll speak to what Ron has been talking about, which is mostly in terms of accelerating an idea from his head or a writer's head to the screen. And so previs and just by the time you show up on set, you've already kind of lit and planned everything you're going to do, leaving room for some spontaneity, but so much. There have been so many barriers that slows down ideas that I'm sure he's had over the course of his career, and now he's going back to. He's like, hey, maybe we can try this. So, but at the same time, he's old school, so he doesn't. The stuff we see that is all AI is too surreal and
Yeah.
dreamlike. It's not quite there yet. It doesn't have the emotion. But for previs, it's actually better than it puts a lot of great artists in a tough place, great storyboard artists and whatnot. But it really helps us look at ideas and sort of weigh the potential of them.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's a very delicate topic in our sector of the industry that's very focused on kind of just the human involvement of artists, and also just the livelihoods that are at stake with it. So there's a lot of curiosity and like respect for the power of what this tool is, but also a really cautious approach to it. But I think we all see. I mean, the ways that we don't use it at all, the ways that it usually ends up coming to me is either how I have to deal with it through search and discovery on Google, and I've already asked that factors into our campaigns. But also when we make posters and trailers, a lot of time, I mean, if we need a line 80 yard for a trailer or a voiceover in a trailer, we'll start with an AI generated one before we bring in a human voice. So like it expedites the work that way. But at this stage, we prioritize always having kind of it being a tool for like expediting kind of what a human artist's work can be versus replacing anything.
Absolutely. After all, creativity has to come from humans, right? Well, amazing. I have learned a lot. Hopefully you all have too. I want to thank you both for joining us. It's just been a great conversation. And I want to take a beat and just acknowledge what's been happening to the film community right now with all that's been going on in Los Angeles. And we know so many people have been really deeply affected by that. And the Adobe Foundation recently donated $1 million to help support the victims of the wildfires that hit Los Angeles. And I want to invite you all as well. I think we're putting a QR code somewhere up here that you all can scan, and we're matching all donations going to the California Community Foundation and the Entertainment Community Fund. So we invite you all to participate as well. So thank you all. Appreciate it. Enjoy the festival. And thank you both.